Sanctum Sanctorium. This is Dr. Joshua Smith here with our Facebook Live for the evening. I hope everybody is doing well. And so, gonna start again because I don't think that picked up as soon as I would have liked. Hello, and welcome to the Sanctum Sanctorium. This is Dr. Josh Smith, and I am coming to you live. And we are going to be talking about an important subject today, and that is how to talk to our children about suicide. Um, Go talk to your mom. And that was Caitlin putting her 2 cents in. We will be talking. Uh, Hello, brother Conley. Roger, it's great to have you here. Um, so, while I'm doing this video, if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to put them in uh, to comment, and I will answer them uh, during the course of this video. Or if you want to message me later, I will message you back with any questions or response to your comment. This video is being sponsored by my son Jared Smith, who is uh, he is walking in the Out of the Darkness walk for suicide intervention. And so, if you find this video helpful, then you can make a donation at this following link that I'm putting in the comments. Okay, so it is necessary for us as parents and grandparents to talk to our children and grandchildren about suicide. Um, if you want to talk about pandemics, this is hello, Miss Powers. It's good to see you. Uh, if you want to talk about pandemics, this is one that has been sweeping the nation and will continue to sweep the nation. And it requires our help in order to be able to overcome this. And it will definitely require the efforts of parents. Children are hearing about this earlier and earlier, and they need to hear our response to this and what we think, and know that we are there to help them if we want to stop the increase of suicides and put a halt to this and prevent further tragedy. I remember when I first learned about suicide, and that was going to the movies with my brother Jared. And if I remember correctly, I was 12 and he was 8, and we went and saw Dead Poet Society. And I remember just leaving the dollar theaters and just crying, both of us, sitting on the curb waiting for our parents to pick us up, and looking at my brother and not understanding that that could really happen. And that was my first experience understanding this. There are people who believe that if we talk about suicide, that it will lead to children wanting to complete suicide, and that is just not the case. Talking about it as parents and grandparents helps prevent people from attempting suicide. And one of the biggest questions that I get asked is, when do you talk to a child about suicide? And based off my experience and the research that it is available, the answer is 6th grade. Now that might seem really young to some of you all, but that is, at that point they have heard about it, and they have had people talk about it, and they need to hear your perspective, and they need to know that you love them, and they need to know that you're there for a resource. um, I remember, because I've had two brothers out of my three younger brothers commit suicide. And I remember when my brother Jacob committed suicide, and he had, uh, at the time of his death, he had a daughter who was 11 and a son who was 7. And they had to fly out here from Utah to Indiana by themselves. And I can't imagine that. I'm 41 years old. I would be a mess if my father passed away now. I can only imagine what it was like for these two children flying by themselves to attend their father's funeral. And I remember them being at the funeral home, and some people mean well, and they were trying to be comforting to these children. And one person, uh, while the son Jaden was crying, came up to him and said, "Now your father doesn't want you to be sad." He's 8 years old, and so that's when Uncle Josh had to step in and sit by them and just be there with them to make sure that they were okay. The Unfortunately, some of the children that we deal with and we know are exposed to this a lot sooner than even sixth grade. I find my son Eli to be an amazing young man, and he participates in the Out of the Darkness walk every year. This will be his third year. He by himself in the 3 years has raised $500 for suicide intervention, and I just find that amazing. Okay, so let's talk about the driving force in this. How do we have this discussion? First of all, if you have the discussion, you have accomplished 50% of the goal. Many times as parents, we have to have very difficult discussions, and this is one of them. But if we have the discussion, it normalizes the concept to our children that this is a thing that could happen, and that we are a safe place where we can talk about it and we won't be weirded out by any questions that they may have or any concerns or thoughts that might occur. 50% of the people in this world have had a suicidal thought in their life. So it stands to reason that 50% of the children have. And many children have misconceptions about what would happen if they told people that they were having suicidal thoughts. I had my first suicidal thought when I was 15 years old. I didn't tell anybody for over 16 years because I was so scared of what would happen to me if I didn't have, if I told somebody what I was thinking and feeling. And I have great parents, but I was scared. If we bring up the conversation, we normalize talking about it. We normalize talking about it in a safe place. And if it is occurring, we want to know. It I find that difficult conversations are best held over food. That's what I prefer. Ice cream is great. Maybe, a cookie cake. Something dessertish. Uh, a little sugar to help the suicide conversation go down. And it does not have to be an amazing segue into this conversation. I know it's a tough subject, but it can be as simple as, you know what, James? I was listening to Dr. Josh's Facebook Live discussion about suicide the other day, and it got me to thinking, have you ever had any thoughts about suicide? It can be that simple. I will tell you, if anybody had asked me directly about suicide when I was a young person, I would have answered them. But I would, so asking a direct question will get you to know the truth. Another other ways that you can go about it is if you have a friend, a family member who has had experience with mental health issues, you can bring that up. Johnny, I want to talk to you a little bit about your Uncle Jared. And he was a good young man, and he passed away before you were born, and he passed away because he was committed suicide. And it's such an important issue, and I was just wondering if you've ever had thoughts like that. If you yourself have had thoughts like that, you can say that. John, I've had thoughts like that before, and they're very difficult, and uh, they become very hard to overcome. Um, One of the main things that you want them to know is that you are a safe avenue to come to. The majority of the time, children are going to want to keep that to themselves out of shame. They are most likely, if they go to someone, to go to a friend, which is good. I'm glad they go to somebody. But I will tell you this: if a child tells someone that they are having suicidal thoughts, they are 62% less likely to attempt suicide. If they tell a parent, they are 98% less likely to commit suicide. So I think going to a parent is a great option. They may they may say, and it may be true, that they've never had those thoughts. And and you can say, I am so glad to hear that you've never had those thoughts. And I want you to know that if you ever do have those thoughts, I am here to listen. I am here to help no matter what you're going through. And if they say they've had those thoughts, then you're going to have some follow up questions. Now, one of the things is you're going to be really proud of them for telling you because that took a lot of courage on their part. And you're going to say, thank you so much for telling me. Can you tell me how long this has been going on? One of the things, and it is hard as a parent when you hear those words. When I when I am functioning as a provider, I have heard the words that a child is feeling suicidal, and it's hard. But when you hear your own child say it, it really hurts. But it is good that you know. You'll want to talk with them about how long they've been having these thoughts, how often they occur, when was the last time they had a suicidal thought. Do they ever think about what they might do? If they are not in therapy, you may consider that and you may talk to them about that. Uh, and many times, people have informal consultations with me, and you all are welcome to do that. Call me up and say, Josh, I had a conversation with my child about suicide. And I'm like, good job having the conversation. And they said that they were having suicidal thoughts, and this is what they were reporting. What do you think would be appropriate follow up? Now, I'm a little bit biased because I'm a psychologist, but there is very little downside to going to a qualified therapist, and I'll tell you, I will be willing to help out with referrals for appropriate therapists because I know the really good ones, and I can help you get into those. And for those of you who are out of state, contacting the local state psychological association can also help lead to a good referral. Um, Now, you had the conversation once, and you are going to want to repeat this conversation, I would say, about every year. So, remember what last year when we talked about suicide and how sometimes people have those thoughts? I wanted to check in and see how you're doing. And also during this conversation, and it's a good one to bring into the repeat conversations, is how to respond if one of their friends tell them that they're having suicidal thoughts. Um, so, you know, talk to them about not keeping it a secret if one of their friends tell them. Talk to them about going to a responsible adult or the child's parent if possible. And that if that is not a possibility, that they can come to you and that you will help them out through this situation, but that it cannot stay secret. And so and talking about how you would respond to a friend also can lead into a good avenue and how they would respond if they were to have these kinds of thoughts. Um, it is good for um, each person in the family to have the suicide helpline number and text number. The text number is relatively new. It is 741-741. Now, this help number, both text and phone, is is also for the families, not just the person who's experiencing suicidal thoughts. So you can call or text the call number is 1-800-243-TALK. And you can call or text and say, my son is having suicidal thoughts. I don't know what to do. It's 24/7. It has crisis therapists available, and they can give you advice on how to help your child in those situations. Um, Now, I will tell you, you'll have your talks, and it is quite likely that the individuals who are having suicidal thoughts, that these experiences will not come at opportune times. So you will be very tired. Uh, for me, they tended to have it a lot when I was helping out in the church youth program, and I would be driving the children home after an activity, and they're like, Josh, and I can tell by the tone of their voice that it's like, oh, something's coming. Uh, one of one of the more intense ones I had happened at a camp out when it was freezing in the middle of the night. Um, and you may be tired, you may be overwhelmed, but you when those conversations happen, you get yourself ready. You you reach over, you grab yourself a Diet Coke, and you get yourself prepared for the long haul. Because if a child has chosen to talk to you about something, then we need to honor that request. Okay, let's talk about hospitals, psychiatric hospitals. No parent wants to put their child in a psychiatric hospital. It is one of the worst things that you can imagine having to do. Um, when I was young, I thought if I told someone I would get put in a psychiatric hospital and that I would be stuck there for the rest of my life. The average stay is 5 to 7 days. Uh, Psychiatric hospitals are boring, uh, and but they do one thing really well, and that is they keep people safe. They stop people from following up on their plans. Um, there are some parents who are dramatically against their child being hospitalized, and I understand that. I do not want my children to be hospitalized, and It's been close a few times with my children. And I will tell you, uh, if it happened, it would be a very difficult circumstance for me and my wife, but I would do it because I would rather have them safe than have them gone for a week. If they're gone for a week and they're safe, fine, because they need to stay safe. Uh, at the hospitals, they would be able to see a psychiatrist, and they would be able to have their medication adjusted or implemented quicker. Let's talk about medicine. Some parents are devout against medicine. And to tell you the truth, if everybody only did medicine, I'd be out of a job because, I talk to people. I give no medicine. I come up with behavior plans and do cognitive behavioral therapy. But there are some people who need medicine. Uh, one of the great things that we have available to us now is gene site testing, where an individual's DNA can be evaluated and it can be determined what a medication would respond best to with the least amount of side effects. Um, and I strongly recommend that before a person goes on medication. I take medicine. I take it. It helps. I enjoy not having suicidal thoughts on a daily basis. For severe depression and anxiety, the best treatment is therapy and medication. If you want to start with therapy and get the opinion of the psychologist about whether he or she would refer for therapy, then that is completely fine. But this is a big problem, and we need to open our minds in order to overcome it. And we need to open it to the all available possibilities. Um, so, the the experience of suicide is a very personal experience for many people. One of the questions that I get a lot is, if you've had people die of suicide in your family, how do you talk to your children about it? My daughter Caitlin, she's 16 years old. She's severely autistic, and today I did something that I do every Sunday, which is I take her for a drive when she wakes up in the morning, and on when we get in the car, she knows it's Sunday morning, and she'll say, Uncle Jacob, Uncle Jacob, Uncle Jacob," and we will drive to Walnut Ridge Cemetery, where he is buried, and she will walk out to his headstone. She will kiss her hand and touch the headstone, and then go back to the car. Uh, Now, Caitlin does not have a firm understanding of what suicide is. She knows that she loves her Uncle Jacob. She knows that he's not here with us. And she knows that she misses him. And every Sunday morning she wants to see him, which is a very special experience for me and her. The key to all of this is meeting the children where they're at. When we are dealing with young children, we talk in very concrete terms. Um, so, in explaining to my children about their Uncle Jacob, I need to tell you all some sad news. Your Uncle Jacob is dead, and he killed himself. Now, that is that is hard to hear, but young children can get confused. Sometimes when they hear um, he's in a better place, they're like, well, if he's in a better place, I want to go there too. Um, if it's very, very young children, like, under 6, you know, uh, we wouldn't say he killed himself. We might say he had a disease for a long time that took his life. When you get up into teenagers or preteens, many times they want to know how. Uh, they do not need to know all the grisly details. And there are details of both Jacob and Jared's death that uh, I may not tell my children. But I did tell them when I felt that they were of understanding that Uncle Jacob shot himself with a gun. Um, and so, but it does require an understanding of where your child is at and to speak at their maturity level. Um, another point that I would another question I get asked is, what about response prevention? One of the reasons why we ask about uh, whether a person is what method a person is considering for suicide is because we know how far along they're in their thinking when they determine what method they want to use. And that is a very personal decision for people who are making suicidal statements. And so, and it tells us a lot how to prepare. Um, if somebody says they want to jump off a bridge and they don't live close to a bridge, then we're feeling pretty good. If they live in Jeffersonville, Indiana, right by the walking bridge, then we got a concern. If they say they want to shoot themselves in the head and they live in a house with 50 guns, then we got a concern. It's always difficult for me uh, when I have to have these conversations with parents whose child want to shoot themselves and their family has an extensive gun collection. And I've prepped myself up and I'm like, I'm going to get ready and we're going to talk about gun safety. And I remember one time, and I'll never forget this. Uh, I was talking to a 15-year-old, and he said he was feeling suicidal. He wanted to shoot himself. I said, "Are there guns in the household?" And he said, "Yes, my father has 50 guns, and they are in a gun cabinet that's never locked, and I know where the ammo is." And I'm like, "Okay, well, this is going to be a concern." And the child was admitted to Wellstone, and he um, and I was talking to his father before he was released, and I knew we were going to have to talk about gun safety. And I started and say, I respect everybody's right to have a gun, but your son did make this statement about shooting, and he's like, Dr. Josh, I'm going to stop you right there. All the guns have been taken to my father's house, and they're going to stay there until my son is doing better, and then when they come back, they're going to be in a locked gun closet with the ammunition stored separately. And you know that was one of those situations where I did cry during a session because obviously this man loved guns and it was a big hobby of his, but he was not going to put his child in a dangerous situation. And there are a number of interventions that can be done to secure guns through locked cabinets, through trigger locks, through storing ammunition in a separate area. There are so many available interventions to keep our children safe from guns. And 50% of all suicides occur with firearms. So we need to have honest conversations about guns and suicide if we're going to make this situation better. I experienced my first suicidal thought when I was 15 years old. Um, I had I probably had depression and anxiety for a while, and if you can believe it, I was a geek in high school, which is tremendous to believe, but it's true. And I was bullied in horrible ways. Um, just beat up severely. I remember being held up against the wall while one kid would pee in the toilet and then get a swirly with the dirty toilet water. And I just felt horrible about myself, and I started having suicidal thoughts, and I was scared to death to tell anybody. I I had big dreams for myself. There was things I wanted to do, and I didn't want to be have a mental illness and that keep me from doing the things that I wanted to do. And so I didn't tell anybody. I served a mission for my church in Concepcion, Chile, for 2 years, which was a wonderful experience, but also a difficult experience. And I had to fight suicidal thoughts every day of my mission. I met a wonderful woman after my mission and married her, and still had suicidal thoughts on my wedding day. Um, and I attempted suicide by jumping off the Second Street Bridge when I was 32 years old. And I suffered for over 16 years with suicidal thoughts. And I went into the hospital, and interestingly enough, uh, they started me on some medication, and I was one of the lucky ones that the medication helped right away. I did an intensive outpatient program after the hospital, and I started knowing the joy of having a day without a suicidal thought. On October 30th, it'll be 10 years from my suicide attempt, and since that time, I've achieved my doctorate degree and started my own business, and I am so grateful for these last 10 years. They have been outstanding. Uh, but if there is one thing that I would do differently is I would have got help earlier. How great would it have been to go on a mission and not had a suicidal thought every day? I think I would have liked my wedding better if I didn't have a suicidal thought that day. I don't want children and teenagers to make the same mistake that I did. And I want, and I don't want you all to have to go through losing a child or two children like my parents have. Um, and these are difficult things, but I know that whether or not your child ever has suicidal thoughts, you all will be stronger because of this conversation. And I know that you all, if there is a concern, that your child will be able to come to you for help if you can establish that relationship of trust. Um, I have the link posted if anybody would like to make a donation to the Out of the Darkness Walk, or if anybody would like to join us in the walk. We accept virtual walkers or walkers who are in Louisville, Kentucky area the first Saturday in November. Are welcome to join me and my family. Um, the comments didn't really come up that much here while I was talking, because I'm not that great at computers. I get by. I'll read the comments afterwards and respond to those. Feel free to message me through a direct message, or if you have my contact information, or put a comment on this video and I will respond. And I will also get this video uploaded to my YouTube tomorrow. And thank you all so much for listening to this presentation, and let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Have a good night.